All right, let's talk about yesterday's episode of Vampire Diaries. And dare I say, it was actually a good episode. There was so much going on, it was crazy. Okay, so basically, Damon wants to bring Bonnie back. And in order for him to do this, he needs to be able to turn Silas into a vampire. Now, Bonnie, of course, is reluctant to do this because she already knows that there are so many things that go awry, and when you cross over, things can go wrong, and she's not really down for it. Jeremy basically says, listen, I've been doing everything that you wanted me to do for you. You have to do this for me. So Jeremy is basically like, listen, I can't stand looking at you and feeling this way and not being able to touch you. So he wants to get Bonnie back. Now, Damon has to work with Silas. So Silas basically says, I need your brother to die in order for me to get information from Ketsia/Tessa. And the reason why Stefan needs to die is because in the last episode, or a couple episodes ago, when she did that mind thing to them, they lost their powers. And so in order for Silas to be able to read her mind and do all that kind of mind compulsion stuff, Stefan needs to die. So Damon snaps his neck, and Silas is able to get to turn himself sort of into Stefan and have her believe that he's Stefan, and so that he can read her mind. And of course, Ketsia doesn't know this. She doesn't realize what's going on. Now, on the other side, Elena has been trying to find out who the professor is and what he's up to. And the professor basically says to her, listen, you and your friends need to hightail it out of here, because a lot of people are starting to ask questions, and they're soon going to start finding out exactly what's going on. And he knows that Elena is a vampire, which is crazy. So obviously, at the very beginning of the episode, he was in the process of turning Jesse, who was the student who sort of has a crush on Caroline. So he's in the process of trying to turn him into a vampire. So we already know that he knows way too much information, and it turns out he is the legal guardian of this other guy named Aaron, and he manages his trust. And Aaron was friends of, I believe her name was Megan, who was the roommate of Elena that got killed at the very beginning of the season. So very complicated, but clearly the professor has his hands in many different characters and storylines on the show so far. Now, while all this is going on, there's been this woman who took Catherine a couple of episodes ago, and she's been holding her, and we don't really know why. And she also was traveling with this guy, this Russian guy, she did something to Matt. Like in last week's episode, Matt was videotaping himself because he's trying to figure out like what is going on with him. Like he's losing time and he doesn't know what's happening. And all of a sudden he starts talking with this Russian accent. So now we find out in this episode that this woman's name is Nadia Petrova, and that she is actually Catherine's daughter. So, well, hello, that's crazy. So if you remember way back in like season 2, we found out that Catherine gave birth, and then she killed herself. So Nadia is actually Catherine's daughter. Completely crazy. So Catherine now is the one who basically her blood is the cure, because in the end of last season, Elena basically shoved the cure down Catherine's throat and turned her into a human. And now Silas wants that cure. And so in order for him, and that is why he keeps trying to go after Catherine, because her blood is basically the cure. So now when Ketsia finds out that Silas was lying, and him and Damon were trying to fool her, she basically sticks her hand into Silas's body and like squeezes his heart so hard that it basically stops his heart. So it like drains him off of his blood. His face is all drained. It's gray and the veins are sticking out. And so he's basically dead. So and Damon finds him, and Elena, both Damon and Elena find him, and they're like, oh my God, what's going on? So Damon's like, this is not good. We need to fix this. So knock on the door. Who's there? Catherine. So Catherine comes in, and Damon is like looking at her, and she's like basically she's like, what are you doing? And he grabs her, he bites her, and he basically feeds Catherine to Silas, and he drains her of her blood. So now Silas is back awake, which means he's a vampire, and and Catherine's laying on the ground. So we're all standing over her thinking she's dead, and all of a sudden she wakes up. So, and the words that come out of her mouth are, "Am I in hell?" So it's like, what? So all this craziness happens. Oh, and Tyler came back and basically broke up with Caroline. I mean, who cares about that part of the story? But, there was so much other stuff going on. It was actually a pretty decent episode. There was a lot of little twists and turns, and there were a lot of really good revelations. So I was surprised. I mean, like Vampire Diaries has let me down a lot lately. And, I'm never a fan of how they treated Bonnie, and, still not a big fan of how they've treated her death. But these last couple things have been, whoa, kind of good. So I'm glad that it's starting to get a little bit back on track, and I'm not being able to predict just how the episodes are going to end. So that is my review of the Vampire Diaries.